Australia strengthened their pack as the Lions switch up their bench options. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. Okay, so teams are out for Test 2. Obviously, the Lions have the opportunity to clinch the series in this one, but you got to expect, a bit of a, reaction from Australia as well. A lot of criticism about especially the first half performance. And then, second half in the first test, I thought they were decent, but they need to bring more of that. They need to bring more physicality. And I think, with the changes they made to their pack, they should at least be able to do that. Whether that gets them the win or not, will kind of remained to be seen. But so it's the second test. It's in Melbourne Cricket Ground. It's on Saturday, 26th of July. And it is, what time? It's normally like 10:45, I think, over here. Like, it kicks off, right? In the morning. 10:45, round about that time. So we're looking forward to this. I think anyone who's watched the Lions series, this is the game to watch. Kind of feeling, obviously a lot of neutrals will want Australia to win because you don't want the third test to be a dead rubber. But, the problem with that is, as a Lions fan, you don't want to be tempting fate, right? Thinking, oh, well, if Australia get one, at least it'll be an exciting last test. But how exciting is it going to be if your team loses this series because of it? So it's kind of interesting, I think, in that regard. But for me, it's just, it's going to be a great game of rugby anyway. So let's just enjoy it, whoever ends up winning. So what we're going to do is, as usual, go down through the teams. And we're not going to spend as much time as we did in the first test because we've gone over a lot of these players already. There are obviously changes to both teams, and there is that, but it's not a huge amount of change at the same time. But let's go through it anyway. So James Slipper, there at tight head, loose head. Tight head. What am I talking about? At loose head. Thought he had a decent first test. Australia did well, I think, in the scrum overall. Parecki then comes in at hooker as well, so he's definitely a big boost to that front row. Alan Alatoa, again, decent in that first test, and it's a good front row there. And the Lions, we saw Genge kind of struggled in that first test in the first half. And Australia will be looking for that as a bit of a platform for them. Obviously, they need to bring a lot more physicality, as I said. But if we look now into the second row, you can see that physicality coming there. Nick Frost played the first test. Will Skelton, though, coming back. Absolute mountain of a man, that guy. Now, one thing is, for me, he plays a lot better for his clubs than he does for the Wallabies. But he's still, he's still a great player. And, if he gets it up any kind of head of steam, getting the guy down on the ground is so difficult. And then he just has that, ability, obviously, because he's going to get tackled low. The offloads are always on as well. So sucking in defenders, creating space for other people, he's definitely going to do that. And the Wallabies, that's what they really lacked in that first half of the first test, was go forward with ball in hand, like just some people bringing that physicality in attack and defense, being able to bend the line, suck in those defenders and create that space out wide that, the Australian backs, they have all of the firepower to be able to exploit it. They just need to make the space. And with Skelton in there, definitely gives them a chance. Another guy coming back from injury, Rob Valentini as well, a big unit there, going to give them a good carrying threat as well. And you look at that with the two of them in there, they're definitely going to be able to commit more Lions defenders when they're carrying the ball, which means there's got to be like space and mismatches elsewhere on the field as well. And it's up to the Wallabies. It's one thing of being able to create the space, but then being able to get the ball to that space is another thing. And then being able to then exploit once you get to the space. I think one of the things they kind of failed at was, first of all, first half definitely was creating that space. Second half, I felt it was the fact that they were creating space, but they weren't exploiting it as much as maybe they should have done. So definitely a lot of improvement needed from the Wallabies, obviously, to win the second test. But, two really good players, or along with Parecki, like three really good players to bring into that pack, and really does, bring them up a level, I think. Then, look at the rest of that back row. You got Fraser McWright, who was brilliant in that first test, real threat over the ball. And, if you got the likes of Valentini and Skelton in there in defence as well, being aggressive, it means that there'll be more opportunities for somebody like McWright to get over that ball as well and poach and win penalties. Then Harry Wilson, captain, thought he had an excellent first test. Really good ball playing skills as well. Like, he put in a great kick that just about, almost got Potter in for a try. It just about beat him over the line in the 22. But, it shows his awareness, of what's on and what space is there, and the ability as well. One thing is be able to see it, and another thing is be able to do it. And it was a really good kick. It's one of those ones where the ball bounces, a little bit more infield, and suddenly Potter is in for a try, and we have a completely different end to the game possibly. But yeah, really nice back row there. I think it looks pretty balanced as well. As I said, they're going to be super competitive on the Lions ball, and the Lions, one of the things, their problem is going to be is that ball security. Especially we saw in the second half where the Lions found it very hard to string phases together, and I think that kind of allowed Australia then to build themselves back into the test. So having even more ability to threaten that Lions ball is definitely going to help them out. Then the backline is completely unchanged. Jake Gordon and Tom Lina again starting a halfback. I thought that they might have just decided to go with McDermott and Donaldson as the starting halfback. So it's not they were much better when they come on, but it's kind of, I can see why Schmidt would give these guys another go out and see. Like I said it myself, Lina, it was his first test start, only his fourth test cap, I think, and he's going to be so much better for that. And I think you're going to see that in this test as well. He's going to have a pack who, potentially are going to give him a bit more front foot. They should definitely give him a bit more front foot, and he's going to be more comfortable, I think, behind that back. And, with the two of them staying together as well as a unit rather than kind of splitting up a partnership, expecting certainly better things from both of those. Then, Harry Potter, I thought, not brilliant on the wing, but there were a few sniffs here and there for him as well. And, the guy's a finisher. He just needs to get that chance. And if he can get a try for Australia, at a crucial time, it's going to be worth its weight in gold. Then the midfield, Ikitau and Suilihi there. So, I thought they were kind of, certainly the first half, overshadowed by their Lions counterparts. Second half, they came into the game a little bit more, but Suilihi, actually Bunyak, he was the one who dragged him over the line and won that penalty for him holding onto the ball. But it was a really nice line they took, and he almost got there as well. Again, close moments for Australia. Especially again, we kind of look at the first half almost through our first test almost through the lens of the first half, where the Lions were so dominant, but second half Australia were the team on top. And even if it goes the same way in the second test, if they can be a little bit closer at half time, then that could be enough for them to get over to win. But yeah, decent centre pairing there. But I think, again, if that, pack now with the likes of Parecki, Skelton and Valentini coming into it, can just get them a little bit more in terms of that front foot, then these guys really could cause a problem. Somebody who did cause a problem, whether Australia were on top or not, was Max Jorgensen. For me, of the backs, certainly the best player on the Australian team. and he got his try. Really good, like competed in the air. I think he was really the only one that competed, really competed in the air for the Wallabies, and stripped that ball off Keenan, and then just having the pace then to win. And then he had a few other moments as well, a few other chances where he was a threat, and he looked certainly the liveliest of the back three for Australia, and for me again, probably their best back. Then Tom Wright there at fullback, coming into the line maybe a little bit more, and seeing him maybe kind of try and pick passes as well and kind of act as a second distributor, I think would be good for the Wallabies. But they're basically giving that back line a chance to go again, and we'll see whether they're going to deliver or not. There's no doubt in my mind, at least, that they have the talent to be able to do it, but it's all about execution, really, isn't it? Then onto the bench then, so 6-2 split here. We got Billy Pollard, Angus Bell, and Tom Robertson as the replacement front rows. I thought that the Lions kind of did a bit better when the replacements come on. So it'd be interesting to see how, like in a set piece at least. But these guys, I think, gave Australia a little bit more around the park. And there was a lot from the bench that actually did that for them. Got Jeremy Williams there. Then Langy Gleeson, another guy who's recovered from injury, to come onto the bench. He's going to be an exciting guy to see coming off the bench as well. And for me, certainly the forward who had the most impact for Australia, Carlo Tizzano. He got a try, and he was just all action. Really good at carrying the ball, and he seems kind of built for that kind of thing. Towards the end of the test, people are tired. That guy's going to make, meters for days. And then the two backs then, Tate McDermott and Ben Donaldson. So I think that means no Kellaway, right? He was on the bench last week. So these two, they showed, in the first test that they can absolutely have an impact off the bench. And again, if Australia can get closer or even be leading when these guys are coming on, they've shown that they can definitely, deliver a victory for them. So, decent bench for Australia. They had the best impact, certainly, of the two teams last week, and they're going to be looking for that again as well this week. Okay, so let's move on to the Lions team then. So, as usual in rugby, no two teams can pick can display their teams in the same order. So we're going to start with the backs for the Lions. So we've got Hugh Keenan there. Thought he was decent in the air, other than obviously getting stripped for that try for Jorgensen. But fairly competitive in the air. Went looking for work, looked lively, decent, defensively. Still a little bit off for me in that one, so I'm expecting a better performance. Tommy Freeman, I think, probably lucky to get another go. I think if Darcy Graham hadn't gotten himself injured after 16 minutes, having scored a try, certainly would have been in the frame, I think, to take the spot, because Freeman, for me, was probably the worst of the Lions' backs last time. Really like him as a player. I think he's a brilliant try threat, and the Lions aren't getting him in enough positions to really show what he has. So hopefully they can do that in this test. But in terms of just the kicking contest, for me, he was the weakest under the high ball, and going to have to be better in this one. But as well, I thought Lowe wasn't brilliant, but we'll come on to him in a second. But Freeman maybe a little bit lucky, like not talent-wise. I'm not knocking his talent. As I said, I think he's a brilliant player. Just think that performance certainly opened the door for Darcy Graham to potentially, put his hand up to get in. He did it with his performance, but then he got injured, so unlucky for him. Then centres, we've got Hugh Jones and Bundy Aki. So recently it was actually Hugh Jones and Ringrose who were announced as the centres, but Ringrose actually withdrew from the squad, or the matchday squad, because of a concussion issue. like, and he made that call himself. So, you know, some people saying brave. I think it was smart of him, honestly. Concussion is not something you want to mess about with. You look at the players now who are like suing World Rugby and the different unions and things like that because, they can't even remember their playing days and stuff like that. So, things like concussion, yeah, absolutely back him on taking that seriously. Like in the future, like people say, oh, he'll regret that now. He'll never, especially if he doesn't get on in the third test, like, never going to be, a starter for the Lions, etc. But, he's hopefully going to have his mental health and his health as well as physical health, because of this, the decision he made. Not just this decision, but, he's making smart decisions all the way through his career. He's setting himself up better for life. But anyway, back to these two guys. So Ringrose was initially picked in there because Tuipulotu is out with an injury. So, because there was, for me at least, there was no way you change that centre pairing unless there was an injury. So, and then Ringrose withdrew, so Aki came in there. So Aki promoted up from the bench. But it's going to be interesting, Aki and Jones together. You certainly in terms of, I know, like, they definitely can play together as a combination. It's just about that, again, that understanding that would be there if it was Aki and Ringrose or Tuipulotu and Jones. You don't expect it to be there as much as this one. And also the fact that, Aki and Tuipulotu were very kind of different types of players. Aki definitely has more kind of, more ability to kind of bust the line and to make those hard carries. But Tuipulotu is a bit more is more evasive and has better awareness of his support as well. So, it's going to be interesting to see if Aki and Jones are going to be combining together as centres, or they're just going to be kind of playing alongside each other. Because, again, Aki, one of the things, that I think is not great about his game is his ability to spot his support and find them with passes as well. So going to be interesting to see how those guys go. Then James Lowe, again, didn't have his best game in the first test. A few wayward kicks, but the thing is, Duhan van der Merwe, he got a try against the First Nations and Pacifica team, but unless the Lions were going to change fundamentally how they're playing, he wasn't going to get dropped, because Van der Merwe does not have that kicking game that Lowe has, and I think that's why he's a hard one to kind of to oust from his position, because he does have that ability to kick. Now, his kicking game wasn't great in the first test, honestly. A few wayward kicks that ended up, the Lions having to trot back the other way on a couple of occasions. But he was good in the air, decent defensively. Could have, been a bit better, I think, going forward. But, I think the back three in general, they could have been better on that side of the ball as well. But, with the second test, hopefully going to see those improvements from him. He has the confidence, and if he can get just, whether it's, a bit of a step, a good catch in the air, a good kick, or just hit somebody really hard and get his tail up, I think he's going to have a fantastic second test. Then the halfbacks, they were brilliant in the first test. Finn Russell, the way he runs that back line is brilliant, and it just shows the maturity that he has now as a player. And, really happy to see him back in there. Don't want to see him getting injured, especially if we do lose the second test, because I think, not necessarily that we absolutely need Russell to win the third test. It's more that he's the best man for the job, right? And you want him in there. And, I'm just really happy to see him in there. Same with Gibson Park. I think he's a standout 9. He keeps that pace going. And, I think that the Lions kind of adapted a little bit better than I've seen them previously to the threat at the breakdown as well. And that really helped Gibson Parker as well. And then he kind of repaid that with just the speed of ball, the speed of thought and speed of ball as well. Really to keep the lines, especially in that first half, going in the front foot and keeping, the Australian defence kind of off balance as well because of that. Then into the pack, so front row, Andrew Porter coming in for Genge. As I said, Genge kind of struggled, I thought, in the first test in set piece, and not as he was good around the park, but didn't really make up for it. But there's nothing to say that Porter won't do the same because we know Porter. Like if a referee gets in their head that Porter is doing that thing where he kind of his hips come out and he drives in, then he's going to be in for a bad kind of like 50, 60 minutes in the set piece at least. And then that generally affects his general play. I think he's one of those players where if the set piece is going badly for him, it affects the rest of his game as well. And so hopefully, he for him, I think, the first scrum penalty that's given, he's got to be the one to win it, or at least not the one to give it away, because that's going to have a big effect on him. Then Dan Sheehan, guys, is absolute class. Like the fact that he's improved his set piece so much as well, just to add to his athleticism, his speed, his ability on the ball as well, just elevates him up so much higher as well. So again, great he's in there. Tyke Furlong looked much fitter in the first test than he has for a while, and it's good to see him getting games back to back as well. So expecting better from him in this one as well. One thing, when I think handling has been a little bit off, and normally that's kind of a good part of his game. So maybe that's a little bit to do with fatigue and not having the minutes in the legs or the meters in the legs or wherever. But hopefully, this week we see better from Itoji. Brilliant in the first test, and expect him to be so again. Chesham, come off the bench in the first test. Probably like one of the better forwards, certainly off the bench in the first test. No Joe McCarthy got a foot injury, and hope he does make it back for that third test. But Chesham, a decent guy to come in, and the fact that Byrne was so outstanding as well in that first test, really proving all the doubters wrong, including me. Great to see him in there along with Tom Curry, another guy who kind of shut a few people up as well with his performance, and then Jack Conan there. So a really good back row there. But you look at the back row that Australia have, and it's going to be hugely competitive. Then onto the bench. So got Ronan Kelleher there, and I thought Jamie George might have been in with a bit of a shout for inclusion in this one, but the set piece didn't go great in the game on Tuesday, so maybe that counted against him, and Kelleher getting another chance there. But he's definitely got to step things up in the second test. Ellis Genge, demoted from the starting team, but that guy, when he comes on, he's going to tear things up. Will Stewart, really solid to have on the bench as well. I don't think anyone was threatening his spot in the 23. James Ryan then coming in because of the second row injuries, people kind of moving one seat along, as it were. He's going to come on and he's going to be solid, I think, as long as he doesn't get a yellow card, because he got one on Tuesday. But yeah, I think he's going to be solid, and he's going to be good in terms of, if Australia are threatening at the breakdown, he's so good at doing the unseen work, doing that, competing, clearing players out, etc. And it's not going to be flash, but it might be something that the Lions really need in those last kind of 20 minutes. So Jack Morgan then definitely will be flash when he comes on. He's going to bring that competitiveness for the Lions as well. So Byrne, we actually saw it in the first test, and it's been a while either for Ireland on this Lions tour or for Munster that we've seen him really being a beast at the breakdown. So if you have the two of them on the field at the same time competing at the breakdown, suddenly the Lions could flip the script on Australia. Then Alex Mitchell, I think it's one of these ones where Ben White is doing pretty well when he's playing in the other games, but there's not that much of a difference between them, I think. And in a case like that, the guy in possession, is going to be the one that stays. I think it's right that Mitchell stays because of that. Then Owen Farrell is coming on, so for Marcus Smith, and I talked about it when we reviewed the Tuesday game that if there's anyone who was looking like they really were putting themselves forward to be included in this test, Owen Farrell was the guy. Obviously, going to be a lot of detractors saying he shouldn't even be on the tour at all. Wasn't picked initially, etc. And he's kind of leapfrogged Finn Smith and Marcus Smith. But I think the reason for that is because he can give the Lions what they kind of lacked in that second test, which is someone who can kind of steer the ship home and get them over the line in a tight test. I think he gives you that more than Marcus Smith or Finn Smith off the bench. So I can see why he's in there. Then Blair Kinghorn, who's to say he would have been included if certain players had been fit or not, because he got intercepted twice in that game. But overall, I thought he had a decent game. He carried well, defensively, other than loose passes, was okay as well. He was making his tackles. So, and he's someone who I thought, if he had been fit for the first test, would have been included. For me, it would have been a starter rather than on the bench. But it's good to have him on the bench there. And it gives different options as well off the bench and good cover too for the Lions. So that's important, one thing about Aki being on the bench last time was the fact that I didn't like that he didn't cover enough positions, but here you look at it with Owen Farrell can cover 10 and 12, obviously. Blair Kinghorn, your back three really cover there as well. So, it's decent coverage from the bench with those two. But yeah, those are a team. So how we're thinking things are going to go. Well, I think, certainly Australia, I think, are going to be more competitive in the first half than they were in that first test. And it's going to be a bit more kind of nip and tuck and kind of back and forth between the teams. But then I believe that the Lions now, with they've made changes on the bench, not huge amount of changes, but I think the changes they have made are going to give them more impact off the bench. The players who've been given the second chance, or the likes of Genge, who really will have a point to prove, and they're going to step up as well. I think it's going to be almost a flip of the first test, where it's going to be the Lions who are actually finishing the stronger of the two teams. But that's only my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments.